Hi, hello everyone. Okay, so good morning. Very love morning from Singapore here. Okay, so thank you for joining our Tech Talk. Okay, so today we have a topic about General Motors Zero Trust Journey, which is why identity protection was the key. Okay, so a brief summary about our Tech Talk today. Okay, so usually in a zero trust model, organization must assume that a threat exists both inside and outside the network perimeter here. So at the Silverfort, we believe that identity protection is a cornerstone of a robust zero trust strategy. Okay, because it addresses the fundamental challenge of verifying trust in an inherently untrusted environment. By prioritizing and the identity protection, organization can ensure that access to resource and sensitive data is granted based on verified user identities, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access, whether it is from compromised credential, insider threat, or external attacker. Okay. So in this webinar, we will introduce Rob Larsen here. Okay, so he was a former chief security architect at General Motors, GM. Okay, today he will share why identity protection is so critical in GM's zero trust strategy and why he chose Silverfort to help them achieve their goals. Okay, so before we start, for the participant here, if you have any questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A section. Okay, so we will address each question one by one during the session. Okay, Rob, I pass to you.
Oh, thank you, Jinwan. Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Rob Larsen. I'm a Silverfort security advisor. You see my contact information on the bottom left-hand corner of the slide. I want to thank you all for joining today. And as Jinwan said, we're going to be talking a little bit about zero trust and identity and kind of the experience that I had as I went through the process of, engaging in a zero trust strategy and sort of figuring out what it meant and really some things that I learned as I went on that journey. Let's see. Here we go. Hey, my background. 35 years in the security business, and recently I was the chief security architect for General Motors. I was there for about 9 years. And my responsibilities there were around the identity strategy, global manufacturing, cybersecurity, global lab security, some of the key initiatives, zero trust, enterprise crypto, security control rationalization, and global asset management. And before all those, before the GM work, I worked at HP for several years, Dell, Union Carbide, and I started my security career at NASA, the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Here's kind of my ever-living security perspectives. I think there's some challenge. I think the implicit trust model is both dangerous and pervasive across all of our company's networks and devices and users and apps and networks. And what I'm seeing and what I'm learning is the attacks are shifting to compromising identities. So instead of fancy attacks against applications, they're just logging onto the network and then using the trust that's implicit in a lot of these corporate networks to kind of move through the environment, find and harvest credentials. Some of them will be privileged and use those privilege credentials to do things that we wouldn't normally want anybody to do. And I've kind of built my security perspectives here. I really believe that security should enable the business. Like we should be the folks that they come to, and we can help them figure out how to do whatever business activity they choose, but do it securely. I think every security control matters, and I think every account matters, and specifically in the identity protection and provenance space, that's imperative. We have to do that well. I've got some other things here, like adopt modern authentication protocols and protect data correctly, and just-in-time strategies are really smart, and zero trust shrinks the attack surface. But I will tell you that, from my perspective, identity is kind of the key to everything as I've seen it. And here's kind of my zero trust. Like I had the zero trust model at General Motors, and here's what I thought. I thought zero trust was you deploy some zero trust agent, you'd put in a zero trust gateway, and you would inspect all the traffic and make policy decisions, right? So all the traffic goes through the gateway, it's always inspected, and every connected device has a zero trust agent. That's what I thought. But here's what I learned. Yes, there's going to be agents and gateways and some network redesign, but there's also going to be identity provenance, which is, hey, that original and authentic identity. You're going to need to go through an app modernization game plan so that you can adopt things like MFA. You want to create a comprehensive user entitlement view, which says, from a GM perspective or Johnson and Johnson or any company that you work for, you really know, what individual has access to what resources across the environment. And you have to be able to share data wisely, which means you get to tune how you share data and the types of data classifications you share with whom. So it's that's what I learned. On the left-hand side, it sounds very easy. That's what a lot of zero trust companies are going to sell you. Hey, it's super simple. Just deploy the agents, deploy the gateway, and inspect the traffic. But there's more to it than that. And you have to be really prepared to kind of tackle the problem because the zero trust agent, the zero trust security vendors, they don't solve identity provenance and they don't build app modernization strategies and they don't provide entitlement views and they have no idea what your data sharing strategy is. And what I found also and what I learned was identity is the most important zero trust component. It doesn't really matter what zero trust solution you provide or you select. It starts with identity. Have you been able to identify the individual who's about to join your network, even if it's through a zero trust gateway? You really have to know KNOW who has access to what apps. You have to understand the data that these apps have access to, and you have to figure out, how you want to share the data with the various individuals who are logging on through the gateway or through some other app proxy strategy. Applications have to change. That's not exciting, but they have to be able to adopt modern auth patterns. And I think simplifying policy management so that you really are looking for the things that are challenging, makes sense. I think if you have too many policies spread out across too many security controls, it makes it very difficult to figure out if you're protecting your data wisely and if you've really identified the humans properly. Zero trust really is not a product. It's a philosophy. It's a mindset. It's about taking away everything that no one needs, and then only providing them with the things that they're authorized to get access to. So I think when I looked at this game plan, I kind of broke it down into 4 different steps. I think in step 1, you really have to define your requirements and the value of going down the zero trust path. I think you have to kind of make sure that you link the applicable attack vectors with your zero trust strategy. Define that architecture ahead of schedule and establish an executive governance team and strategy and funding model so that you're not stuck halfway through a 3-year deployment. And the other thing I really learned was pull in your SOC and your incident response team members as part of the project because it will change the monitoring strategy of those individuals, especially the incident response team and the SOC. It will change what they're able to see. Step 2, figure out, what individuals have access to what apps. Identify the apps that need modern auth, whether it's SAML or OpenID, meaning pick those standards, match them with those apps that need to modernize, and then help them modernize through some scorecard strategy so that there's a lot of visibility to know who's already ready for zero trust and who needs to adopt the zero trust auth protocols. And use Silverfort to drive identity protection and provenance. Look, User identity protection is a big deal. If we do it wrong, once we enact zero trust, we're not really going to know whether Rob is Rob. So we have to know through the Silverfort game plan who is Rob, and then validate that with a variety of policy challenges that Silverfort can provide. Test the zero trust agent and agentless security capabilities. Sometimes you get less capability with an agentless strategy. Sometimes you get less capability if you're going down an application that isn't a Microsoft centric app. If you're using Azure, see whether you can get kind of a device agnostic view of a zero trust, so that you don't have to worry so much about device management. Map the gateways, because you may have multiple security gateways depending upon how you're routing people through to access an app, and rationalize those capabilities across those gateways so that you really are aware of the challenges that you're looking at and the capabilities to prevent bad behavior on those specific gateways. And then zero trust, as I said on the top of the slide, it's a philosophy, not a product. And so look hard. If you have labs, if you have manufacturing facilities like General Motors had both, design a strategy that actually helps people achieve the zero trust game plan. But manufacturing and labs are different than the enterprise or the corporate side. And so tailor your zero trust strategy to fit those environments. The one size fits all model is really kind of sometimes not very effective, and it can impact labs and manufacturing facilities because they're not the same as the enterprise. So tailor your zero trust strategy to fit the environments, so that you have maybe a different approach for manufacturing and labs. I think that's important. And step 4, as you begin the journey, as you've done step 1, 2, and 3, and you kind of built your philosophy and your strategy, and you've got your game plan going, you've identified the apps that need modernization, you're kind of determining how you're doing the entitlements, and you're beginning to test. Start small, but also don't carve out places and leave them behind. Do that all is all approach. The scope is everything, and then it's a matter of sequencing those steps through the entire environment. Where you can, take out individual security controls because they're no longer necessary as you convert to zero trust. And I'd say plan, test, 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 and I would say communicate, communicate, communicate. We found that communication was a really big key in helping people understand why zero trust is occurring, helping them understand why maybe they may need to dedicate some time to adjust their applications to adopt SAML or OpenID, to understand how the network is changing, and also the value that they derive from this security change. I'd also say in my little picture here on the right, it's modernize, accelerate, unify, and simplify. I think those are great words. But I really think that, you need to know the zero trust value to your customers, your business teams, vendors and partners, IT and security. And I think if you keep the customers at the forefront of your perspective, then you really understand why. What security value do the customers derive from all this change? And what the business teams get. At General Motors, for example, we had a hard time sometimes bringing vendors and third parties onto our network to get access to things that they needed to help us design or deliver a car. With zero trust and identity provenance provided, the underpinnings provided by Silverfort, what that allows us to do is worry less about what device these individuals are using and focus more on accelerating third parties to have access to applications that you may need, or that other companies may need, to accelerate the delivery of business value. And that's a huge benefit to business teams if they have to stop worrying about, how am I going to get this vendor connected? Because the last time it took me 3 weeks. If you do the zero trust game plan right, and you do the identity game plan right, and you use Silverfort wisely, you're going to be able to connect people quickly to the apps or the data or the business processes that they seek. And that actually accelerates business. That's a really cool thing. And on the bottom, I said, have your zero trust story ready and tell it often. And again, when you tie that zero trust story to the Silverfort game plan, you really get a win because you get that provenance of identity, you get the game plan of zero trust where you're taking away all sorts of things that people might have access to, but they don't really need or deserve, and it simplifies and standardizes your game plan. Look, I put this little simple picture here, but you can see on the far left side of this architecture is identity. The first thing that has to be understood is, who is this person coming in? What do they have access to? What data do they have access to? The authorization strategy that app utilizes, and then the effective data sharing and entitlements management strategy. And it's that continuous flow. And you can, this is a very standard architecture, but you can see on the bottom the orchestration, continuous monitoring, validation, and observability. Those elements have to be built into the zero trust strategy. And again, I can't stress this enough. In the zero trust world, that identity, it's the number one thing that has to be done right. If you get identity wrong, it permeates through the entire process, and you end up giving the wrong people access to the data or the applications or the resources they are not they should not have access to. So my final thoughts. I think zero trust program velocity, communication, um, and executive support is critical. If you're going to go down this path, you need some help, and you need to have an actual strategy to present. But I will tell you, identity is the most important zero trust component. Utilize Silverfort to drive that identity provenance. That all is all zero trust security architecture. So whether you have labs, manufacturing, the corporate side, all of them need to be taken into account as you build that zero trust architecture. But understanding that manufacturing and labs and other places besides your corporate side might have different needs and characteristics. So you need to be wise enough to kind of adjust that zero trust approach. Um, you know, I think things down, writing down your functional requirements for zero trust is a big deal because it begins to help other technical teams that might be impacted, like the networking team, the app development team, the endpoint security team, the incident response and SOC teams. It allows them to see what's happening, what you're planning to achieve, and then they can build their requirements on top of the document that you're creating as well. Make sure each team knows their role, right? Sometimes that's kind of confusing. Not everybody can be in charge. Some people are helping and some people are leading. Typical zero trust vendors, Palo Alto, Netscope, Zscaler, McAfee. Illumio is good for ring fencing and other cool things, depending upon what you need. And I think the last thing that I would leave you with is, be prepared to drive changes to applications where it's necessary, monitoring strategies, identity strategy, network design, understanding that data value approach, and then realizing that labs and manufacturing are different than the corporate side. And look, that ends my brief discussion about identity and zero trust. I just can't stress enough how important knowing the individuals in your organization, knowing who they are, understanding who they are, using things like zero trust, plus the amazing capabilities of Silverfort, protecting those service and process accounts, and then ensuring that the human account side, that you really know who they are, and you use Silverfort in some of those invoking MFA capabilities and other policies that Silverfort can enact to assure yourself as you go down this the zero trust path that you really know who's joining your network and accessing your critical resources. And and that kind of ends my conversation
Thank
with
you.
the folks on the call today, and kind of open it up for questions. And
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you, Rob. So yeah, so for the attendees, if you have any question, you can put it into the Q&A chat. Rob, well, I have a question coming in here. Okay, so what I understand is there are so many security vendor offer that hey, we are a zero trust product. So from your perspective, is zero trust a product or a concept?
yeah, I really believe, and that one of the things that I found was it is a concept, it is a mindset, it's a philosophy that says I'm only going to give resource access to the individuals who are specifically granted access to those resources. Sometimes in the enterprise side, once you log on to the network, you can really go almost any way you want to across your enterprise network. And that's the opposite of zero trust. That is trusting everybody to do the right thing all the time. And if you couple that sort of broad access with the fact that you may not know who really is logging on with Rob Larsen's account, you've sort of lost a big control. You don't know the real identity of the human that's using Rob Larsen's account, and you really can't tell what he is accessing because you have given him access to almost everything on the network. And that's a normal characteristic of most networks at most companies today. And so what you really want to do is sort of change that model that says, I'm only going to give Rob Larsen access to what he should have access to do his job. And I'm going to work really hard to identify that Rob Larsen is really Rob Larsen.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so that is a concept, right?
It's
Thank
a
you, Rob.
concept, it's not a product. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Another question come in. Okay, so I understand that you mentioned that you choose Silverfort from as part of your GM journey here, but does Silverfort really care which zero trust product that you choose?
No, that's the beauty of Silverfort. It really is, that decision to use Silverfort to both manage and protect identities is independent of any vendor you might choose. Silverfort is one of those is an actual partner with the other zero trust choices that you make. And the great thing is it really focuses on that identity world, and the zero trust folks, regardless of which vendor you choose, are more focused on gateway and gateway capability, and where there's an agent, sort of managing that agent and helping with sort of data protection. But it's all of their work comes after identity has been achieved, right? And that's the cool part. They're leaving the identity work to somebody else. If all you use is Active Directory, well, that's all you've got. But if you bring Silverfort in, what you have is the ability to protect the identity, whether it's a human or service or process account. And I think that is amazing because none of the other zero trust vendors, as I mentioned in a previous slide, have anything to do with identity. They'll use identity, but they're not protecting the identity. They're not assuring of the company that the individuals logging on are really who they are. And that's a big difference.
Great, great. Thank you for that. So I have one final question coming in. It's
Okay.
related to the concept that you mentioned just now. But can we start a zero trust journey without buying any zero trust product?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the great part about looking at it as a philosophy or a concept as opposed to a product. You can go down a zero trust game plan that starts with working really hard on identity, right? Because I mentioned identity has been abstracted away from the zero trust vendors. So you can get Silverfort right now and start working hard on making sure that service and process accounts are identified and protected, and ensuring that the individuals using AD match the policies that you've established and challenge them where you need to be challenged and enforce things that you need to enforce with the Silverfort capabilities. And that's the cool part about how that Silverfort is. It is the number one thing that's got to be done right, and that's what we do well. And so we can get you get Silverfort, you start using it, you start modernizing your apps. You can do those two things right now. You don't have to choose anything. Modernize your apps and adopt Silverfort, deploy it so that it's protecting your identities, whether it's service and process account or human accounts, and start that journey just like that.
Cool, cool. Thank you, Rob. I think that's all the question that we have so far
Okay.
for this
Okay.
session. And that actually conclude our tech talks, everyone. So hopefully you will learn something from Rob's session today. Okay, and thank you for coming on our tech talk. See you
Yeah,
soon.
thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it. It was fun. Hopefully you guys will reach out to our teams and engage the Silverfort team. They're amazing people.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, have a good day.